ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरुः श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमो ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिन्निति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. I'm very happy to be with all of you in Leicester after a period of some weeks. And Pradyumna Prabhu has requested me to speak on an interesting topic which he has titled The Tree of Life. The term is based on a concept, I believe, that was devised by His Holiness Sachinandan Maharaj, and it pertains to the caring of devotees within a community and in general for one's own spiritual welfare. So I think I'll come to that a little later towards the end of my talk. And since Pradyumna Prabhu has mentioned that you'll be covering the concept of the tree of life as enunciated by Sachinandan Maharaj and developed also later in another session. Today Prabhu wanted me to speak about the importance of mentorship in a community and so on. But since the topic is Tree for Life, I can't resist the temptation of speaking about a tree. But before that, I just want to hope and pray that all of you in Leicester and wherever else you are, either on this Zoom call or on the Facebook and other platforms, I do hope that you're all keeping well and safe. The COVID-19 pandemic has by no means gone away. I do hope you're all taking care and also that you're utilizing this opportunity to advance in your Krishna consciousness. So coming back to the concept of a tree, you know, Krishna consciousness is full of beautiful metaphors, as we all know, and it utilizes objects from the world around us. And trees are something that are so important for us, and we see them all the time around us. So in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has given us an exceedingly interesting metaphor about devotional service, and he has compared it to a tree. Krishna Prema Taru, Premamara Taru. So the word Kalpataru indicates a desire tree, a wish-fulfilling tree. That, of course, doesn't exist on the material platform, but on the spiritual platform, devotional service is indeed like a wish-fulfilling tree, because all auspicious desires can be fulfilled and one can attain all that one actually has been longing for in terms of happiness, love, eternity, knowledge, and so on. So devotional service to Lord Krishna has been compared to this wish-fulfilling desire tree called a kalpa vriksha. And as we all know again, Sri Krishna has advented as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to propagate the science and practice of devotional service to Lord Krishna. So Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami gives an interesting analogy about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in relation to the desire tree of devotional service. He says, Mala Karaha Swayam Krishna, Prema Marahatva Taruhu Swayam, Data Bhokta Tat Phalanam, Yastam Chaitanyam Ashraye. Malakar refers to a gardener, literally one who makes garlands, but in general, one who is a gardener. So Swayam Krishna. So Krishna, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, personally became the gardener. And Prema Amarataruhu Swayam. He also personally became the eternal tree of Krishna Prema. Side by side, Data Bhokta Tat Phalanam. He also became the giver, Data, and the Bhokta, the enjoyer, Tat Phalanam, of the delicious nectarian fruits of the eternal tree of devotional service. Yastam Chaitanyam Ashraye. So I offer my respectful obeisances unto that Lord Chaitanya. So here, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is 3 in 1 when it comes to devotional service. Firstly, he is the gardener who actually brings the tree of devotional service to the material world, and then he sows the seed, and then he also waters it, because that's what a gardener is supposed to do. To acquire seeds, plant them in the soil and look after them, nourish them, pour water on them, protect the plants as they grow, and so on. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, first of all, is the Malakara. He is the gardener who has brought the tree of devotional service, planted the seed, and is watering the seed. Secondly, he is also the tree of devotional service himself. He is the personification of devotional service. Because after all, on the spiritual platform, everything is absolute. And in that sense, non-different from Krishna. So the process of bhakti or devotional service is not different from the Lord himself. So this is what Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami means when he says that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has personally advented as the personified tree of devotional service. And finally, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is also the bestower and the enjoyer of the fruits of devotional service, and that fruit is Krishna Prem. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come in the guise of a devotee, and by actually executing devotional service in his own life, he is demonstrating it to everybody, to the whole world. He is showing the whole world how devotional service is supposed to be performed. So in this way, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the 3-in-1 personification and the tree of devotional service. Kaviraj Goswami goes on to say that once the seed of devotional service was planted in the soil and watered by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then the first fructification of that seed was Madhavendra Puri, who is the grand spiritual master of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, a Paramahansa, Mahabhagavata, great devotee of the Lord. Madhavendra Puri's exalted disciple Ishvara Puri was the next fructification of that seed of devotional service. And as that seed fructified into a plant and then it grew into a tree, then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Kaviraj Goswami says, personally became the trunk, the main trunk of the tree of devotional service. So it is by his inconceivable powers that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became the gardener, the trunk, as well as the branches of this tree simultaneously. Now, every tree has some roots. No tree can exist without roots. So similarly, Srila Kaviraj Goswami says that there were 9 sannyasi associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One of them, Paramananda Puri, was the central root, and there were other 8 sannyasi associates of Mahaprabhu, whose names I need not mention now in order to save time. So they constituted the other 8 roots, which spread in all 8 directions. Now it is also interesting that normally it is the tree that sprouts from the seed and then the roots grow. But here the roots sprouted from the trunk and the tree stood steadfastly on the strength of these 9 roots. Then Srila Kaviraj Goswami goes on to say that from this main trunk, that is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, many branches grew, and above them innumerable other branches expanded. Thus, the branches of the Chaitanya tree formed a cluster or society with great branches covering the entire universe. So it's not an ordinary material tree. But there are some trees, even though they're material, which are very, very expansive. By expansive, I mean that they spread over a very wide area, typically like the banyan tree. I suppose all of you have seen a banyan tree, at least a picture of a banyan tree. Sometimes banyan trees, when they grow fully, can extend over an area of acres of land. Imagine that. One tree growing to occupy eventually and cover an area of several acres of land. And the speciality of the banyan tree is that once the root grows and the branches emerge, these branches also move downwards and they form trunks, which in turn form roots. And this grows laterally or horizontally, also vertically. So even in the material world, we see examples of trees that grow horizontally and vertically. They're very expansive in nature. So similarly, how is it surprising to note that the desired tree of devotional service would also expand in such an inconceivable way to cover not just the whole world, but the whole universe. And in the purport to this verse here, Srila Prabhupada makes a very important statement about our society, which is ISKCON, which he founded. And he says that our International Society for Krishna Consciousness is one of the branches of the Chaitanya tree. A very, very important point. And I'll come to this in a minute or in a few minutes. So anyway, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says that from each branch grow many hundreds of sub-branches. And then from these sub-branches again grow hundreds and hundreds of further sub-branches. And no one can count the number of branches and sub-branches that have grown from this trunk of the tree of devotional service. And also, Kaviraj Goswami lists out many of the important associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Navadvip, that is in Bengal, not just Navadvip, but in Bengal, in Puri, in Varanasi, and in other places. And these branches essentially are his chief associates, his devotees. He mentions, for example, 90 branches in Puri, about 90 branches in Bengal, 36 branches in Jagannath Puri, and some others in Varanasi and so on. And each of these are very, very special devotees. but they do not constitute the entirety of the devotee community of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's devotee community constitutes innumerable devotees. There are hundreds and thousands of such branches, Kaviraj Goswami says, and they are too many to enumerate. And it's also important to note that in each of these branches and sub-branches and sub-sub-branches, there are fruits that grow. Now, normally when you look at a tree that bears fruit, then especially if it is luxuriously bearing fruit, then you will see that practically every branch bears fruit. In some cases, there may be some branches that don't bear fruit, some that bear fruit. But in this desire tree of devotional service, every branch, every sub-branch, every sub-sub-branch and so on bears fruits. And each of these fruits is delicious. The taste of these fruits surpasses the taste of nectar, because this fruit is called Krishna Prem. And then Kaviraj Goswami reveals to us what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually thinks. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is thinking that I am a mere gardener and I am alone here. What can I do alone? So I want to distribute the fruits of devotional service of this Krishna Prem from the tree of devotional service everywhere to one and all. In this way, Mahaprabhu invites the whole world to participate in this most exhilarating and blissful exercise of tasting the fruit of Krishna consciousness and distributing it also simultaneously. So this is what our Krishna consciousness movement is all about. And he also says that actually the main trunk of the tree of devotional service, which is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, branches into two main branches, Advaita Acharya, Nityananda Prabhu, and they each further branch out into many other branches and so on. So in any case, because the topic today is Tree for Life, I thought it's important and interesting for us to also keep in mind how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has visualized this tree of devotional service. So very, very interesting. Also, I mentioned a minute or two ago that Srila Prabhupada mentions in his purport that ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, founded by Srila Prabhupada, is one of the branches of the Chaitanya tree. And this tree has also, this is just one branch, and this one branch has spread all over the world. Yes, there is hardly any country in the world today where we don't have devotees who practice Krishna consciousness. There may not be a formal official center or a temple, but practically in every country there are at least some individual devotees practicing Krishna consciousness. In some countries, there is a vast presence. There are many, many temples, dozens of temples. And in some countries, there are fewest temples and centers. And in some countries, everything operates unofficially, informally. But whatever it may be, there is a presence of this movement, of this branch of the Chaitanya tree all over the world. And these branches and sub-branches, they are keeping on growing. And everywhere there is an opportunity for people to taste this delicious fruit of devotional service and to spread it. So, for example, in this branch of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON, in many countries we have the UK Yatra, which is one sub-branch of that branch. And then in the UK Yatra, which is a branch, then you have the Leicester Yatra, which is a sub-branch. Yes? And in the Leicester Yatra, then you have now, I think all of you wish to develop the mentorship systems. You have these little groups, which will also be small sub-branches that will emanate from that branch. And the idea is that these sub-branches should all remain connected to the mother sub-branch or the mother branch. That's important. The connection to the mother branch or the mother sub-branch or the mother trunk, etc., should be very strong. So I'll come to this point when we speak about mentorship. So in this way, we have the tree of devotional service, and we are fortunate enough to be a part of one branch, and in that branch we are situated somewhere in one of the sub-branches or sub-branches, depending on where we are located in the world. So a tree has many functions. A tree gives fruit, it gives flowers, it gives us wood, it gives us shelter, it gives us many things useful for our daily living. So similarly, the desire tree of devotional service also gives us many useful things. And above all, ultimately, it's meant to give us the fruit of Krishna consciousness, Krishna prema. Now, those of you who have traveled to warmer countries like India, you know the value of a tree in the summer season. When there is scorching heat of the sun everywhere, and you're walking in the sun, and you get the opportunity to go under a tree which has dense foliage, then immediately we experience relief because it's very cooling there. And the glare of the sun is also reduced because you're there in the shade of the tree. And you can sit down there in that cooling shade and relax. And perhaps if you've got some water, you can drink that. If the tree has some fruits, you can eat that, you know. So in the same way, this desired tree of devotional service is meant to give, initially, shelter to the whole world. And shelter from the blazing heat of the trials and tribulations of the material world. And when the devotees and the people gather under the shade of the tree, then they immediately feel relief. So, what does a tree comprise of? It comprises branches, essentially the trunk and then the branches. It is actually the collection, the aggregate of branches that actually gives the shade and the shelter, the cooling effect. That's what gives the trees and the leaves and the flowers and so on. So similarly, we as devotees of ISKCON are under this one branch. And we shouldn't think that what can one branch do? We need a whole tree. But yes, but this one branch is so expansive that it can give shelter to the whole world. It's not like an ordinary material tree. What to speak of one branch, even one sub-branch, one sub-branch is enough to give shelter. So now coming to the devotees in the ISKCON Leicester Yatra in the UK. So you're part with this one sub-branch. And this one sub-branch is also enough to give you shelter, to give you the cooling effect of devotional service, a refuge from the blazing fire of material existence, and the very real prospect of being able to relish the delicious fruit of Krishna prema at some point in the near future. So the important thing is that the sub-branch has to be connected to the branch has to be connected to the tree. In this way, wherever we are, so long as we are all connected to that tree directly or indirectly, to that trunk, and through the branches and sub-branches, then we are secure. Then that shelter, that relief, and the possibility or the practical certainty rather of getting that Krishna prema fruit, is there. It exists. So a big tree can give big shelter. A small tree can give little shelter. So the branches, we note, are synonymous with devotees. So the more advanced the devotees are, naturally, the more shelter, the deeper the shelter that they can provide to the world at large, to the other devotees. But together, when the smaller branches, which may not be very advanced also, come together in the in the association of sincere devotees of the Lord, there is much strength, there is much solace, there is much guidance to be attained. Just as when small branches exist close together very densely, so they can also provide shade and shelter. So it is said that in Kali Yuga, strength comes from unity, from numbers. So when there are many sincere devotees who come together, there is enormous strength in that. So one comes together, for example, in the Radha Madan Mohan temple in Leicester, you all gather on a regular basis. Of course, now due to COVID restrictions, I don't know how much you're able to physically gather together, but sooner or later that will begin, I hope, sooner rather than later. And even if you're not able to physically go there, now association is available online and in other ways as well. So the purpose of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, as Srila Prabhupada has explained several times, is to give association of the devotees to the world. So we come to ISKCON to get the association of devotees. And it is in such association that we get the guidance, we get the inspiration, we get the strength, we get shelter and security, we get support to proceed ahead enthusiastically in our journey to perfection of life, which is Krishna Prema. And because we're living in the material world, any journey is fraught with risks and difficulties and trials and tribulations. So therefore, as we practice devotional service, we need the company of devotees, and there will be difficulties that come along in our individual and collective lives. So we have to be together as devotees in a community. But as a community grows larger and larger, there is a tendency that things become a little impersonal. It's natural. When the group of devotees is small, it's like a family, everyone coming together, everyone knows each other very well, and there's a lot of familiarity, and people know, they help each other, they know each other's situations, and it's very close-knit, very loving, and so on. But as the community grows, as indeed it must, then the fruits of success also bring challenges. And as the number of devotees increase, it becomes increasingly difficult to manage the affairs of the temple, to manage the services, to manage the preaching programs, to manage the lives of the devotees when they need that support and help. So even though devotees are all very well-meaning and they all want the welfare of other devotees, because everyone is very busy in their own lives and in their own devotional service, it may not always be possible for every devotee to look after every other devotee. Even for those who are leading the community of devotees, it may not be possible for them to pay personal attention to everyone. And that is very important for us to do. So what is the alternative? Of course, we do get together in a central location like a temple or a center. We have Sankirtan, we have classes and lectures, we have worship of the deities, we have prasadam. We all get together and go out in the streets for Harinam Sankirtan and distribute books. We render so many other types of services together. So all this is glorious and that is wonderful. And as we do that, we get great happiness. We feel great inspiration in doing things. And yet, as we move along, we also find the need to get some personal shall we say, guidance and inspiration and so on in smaller groups, where we can be more free to ask questions, to reveal our mind, and where we can make adequate progress in Krishna consciousness at a personal level too. So by a combination of meeting in the large group in the temple or the center, and also having these smaller groups elsewhere, where the devotees in these groups meet at their own convenience, in their own homes or at any other location, actually the whole community of devotees can flourish. So such groups exist all over our ISKCON community worldwide. And they are called by different names, like the Bhakti Vriksha groups, or the Namahattas, or the Sangha groups, or the counselor system, and so on and so forth. And in different places, these groups may operate slightly differently. They may have different protocols and methods, but more or less the objective is the same. And I'd like to enumerate some of these important objectives of having these smaller groups. One, of course, is to afford an opportunity for personalized Krishna conscious training to devotees, which of course happens in a larger group as well. But it is just that in the smaller groups, there is more possibility of giving personal attention. So that's the first purpose of such small groups. The second is to give personalized care to the devotees. Sometimes in a large group, as I mentioned, that may not be possible. I often repeat this example, and I may have mentioned it sometime when I was in Leicester with all of you, and I do mention it in other forums as well, that in one temple that I visited many years ago, one brahmachari who I met for the first time, and I was talking to him, and I casually asked him, "So, how is your chanting? How is your japa going?" And he looked and he said, "I've been a brahmachari for 12 years, but nobody has ever asked me that question yet." So, he was feeling the need for some personal attention, for some personal care. So people who would inquire after his well-being, who would try to guide him in his sadhana and his progress in general in Krishna consciousness. So it is not that the devotees in that temple were not well-meaning. Everyone was well-meaning, and it was a very large temple. But because of that largeness, it was difficult to pay attention to devotees. So therefore, having small groups, helps, because then the coordinator or the leader of that group can actually inquire personally about each person's sadhana and each person's life, because we all have so many problems in life that affect our Krishna consciousness. So there can be a discussion on that. There can be some guidance offered. So that's the second reason. Third, it's also a wonderful opportunity to just hear and chant more about the Lord. And who can deny the importance of that? Who can say that this is not a desirable objective? And the fourth purpose is that it affords an opportunity for devotees to come together closely so they can develop loving, trusting relationships amongst each other. So the Vaishnava Sangha grows stronger. Another purpose of such small groups could be that it is effective for distributing services and managing programs and festivals and so on for the temple. So each of these groups could take on specific responsibilities. Let's say in a Rath Yatra, one group takes on the service of preparing prasadam, another takes the responsibility of doing the publicity, like that. And another objective of such small groups could be communication. When you want to inform devotees of certain things and you want to discuss it, not merely passing information, but also discussing things. Because passing on information is so easy in this day of social media, but you may need to discuss a few things, clarify a few things. So these small groups actually are very suitable for these purposes. So in UK, these groups are called mentorship groups, and the system is called the mentorship system. And that's already going on in some place in Bhaktivedanta Manor and in Radha Londoneshwar Temple, and probably in some other places in the UK also. So I'm very happy that you want to start this system here in Leicester as well. And that's a very good idea. Each group has a leader. That leader will always think of herself or himself as the servant of the devotees. The mentor is one who plays the role of a friend, a guide, someone who just gives some nice support, friendly support to the group. There are some words of caution about the mentorship system also. One, as I mentioned earlier, that every branch or sub-branch or sub-sub-branch and so on must remain connected to the mother sub-branch or the mother branch. So similarly, the different mentorship groups must remain connected to the main branch of the yatra. So let's say you have 10 groups, mentorship groups in Leicester, just an example. So all these groups will have their own programs, maybe once a week, twice a week, according to the convenience of the devotees. And they will have a kind of a syllabus or something, I suppose, and they will work according to that curriculum. But they will also equally participate in the temple's programs. They will come to the temple, they will offer services there, and all these mentorship groups will also come together on a weekly basis for the Sunday feast and so on. So that connection to the main branch is very important. And secondly, also the mentor is a friend and guide, not a controller. The mentor is not one who is going to micromanage the lives of the devotees in the mentorship group. So this is in brief, the system, the mentorship system. Now, a brief mention about the tree of life. I have seen the PPTs that were sent to me by Pradyumna Prabhu about the concept given by His Holiness Sachinandan Maharaj. Very interesting concept, and I'm thankful to His Holiness for giving us such nice realization and insights. So in this tree of life, there are 3 parts: the root, the roots, the trunk, and the crown. The crown represents all the branches and the sub-branches along with the leaves and fruits and flowers. And in this model of the tree of life, the crown represents, the services that devotees render to Krishna, their talents, and basically how they share Krishna with others. And the trunk represents the lifestyles and choices. It comes, one can speak in terms of the health of the devotees at all levels, the relationships that the devotees have between friends and fellow devotees and so on. It also includes the kind of values and behavior and attitudes that are there. The roots indicate the individual spiritual practices that the devotees do, which nurture their devotional creeper and make their bond with Krishna very strong. So essentially, it's a process of hearing, chanting, and remembering about the Lord. So this is in brief the whole model of the tree of life. And as Pradyumna Prabhu has mentioned earlier, that you will be hearing more about it in your future sessions. But I want to compare this metaphor and the three aspects, that is the crown, the trunk, and the roots, to the three parts of Vaishnava Dharma. And it's interesting how ultimately all these things correlate, and one can find amazing correspondence between the different models. So, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said that Krishna consciousness it constitutes three fundamental principles. One is Name Ruchi, that means to have taste in the chanting of the holy name. The second is Vaishnava Sevana, which means to serve the devotees of the Lord. And third is Jive Daya, that means to have mercy upon the conditioned or upon the living entities. And that essentially constitutes outreach activities that we do. So this is very interesting. Name Ruchi indicates all those devotional activities that we do, especially hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping, etc., which increase our love for Krishna, our personal sadhana. So that is very, very important. And because the fundamental sadhana that we have is chanting the holy names, therefore, even the supportive subsidiary activities like hearing Srimad Bhagavatam and attending classes, etc., can all be classified under Name Ruchi. So here in the Tree of Life model, this would correspond to the roots, where it's a question of understanding and developing one's personal relationship to Krishna. So by hearing, chanting, remembering, attending classes, reading Srila Prabhupada's books, doing one's japa, doing kirtan, etc., and reflecting on one's devotional principles, etc., one cultivates Nama Ruchi, and the roots become very strong. So this must be the foundation for our devotional service, which means that all the other work we do must be founded upon our individual sadhana. So if our individual chanting and hearing is weak, then everything else will become compromised. Inasmuch as if the roots of a tree are weak, no matter how big the tree has grown, then the tree will be unstable, unsteady. So therefore, Name Ruchi corresponds to the roots of the tree of life, and it implies that we must pay adequate attention to our hearing and chanting and remembering of the Lord. Secondly, we cannot perform devotional service alone all the time. Yes, we can chant japa alone, we can read Prabhupada's books alone, yes, but we also need the association of devotees. It is only in such association that actually our hearing and chanting will flourish, our understanding of Krishna conscious principles and practice will deepen, and we will get excessive taste, and we will get opportunity to serve and engage our senses in every way. So the service to the devotees also includes serving the devotees at all levels. Because when we're living in this association of devotees, we hear from them, we explain Krishna consciousness to them as well, we chant together, hear together. So this is an important principle. This is the primary service, Vaishnava Seva. And that represents the trunk of the tree, where we speak about the health, the relationships, and values. So amongst the devotees, the relationships are based on sound Krishna conscious principles, on the basis of hearing and chanting, on Krishna conscious philosophy. So we develop attitudes of humility, of tolerance, of compassion, of kindness, of serving others in the association of devotees, and we try to be the servant of the devotees. So everything we do has to be done in that mood. And at the same time, when it comes to other devotees, we also try to serve them not just in the platform of the soul, but where required, to the degree required, on the platform of the mind, the emotion, and the body as well. For example, if there's some devotee who's undergoing some emotional problems, yes, devotees can reach out to assist. Let's say some devotee is grieving for the departure of a loved one, so that requires, some support. Similarly, if another devotee is, let's say, sick with some major illness, or someone has some other kind of problem, the devotee community should be there to support and be there by the side of that affected devotee. So Vaishnav Seva has many dimensions. The fundamental dimension is that we help each other progress in Krishna consciousness by inspiring and encouraging each other to hear and chant and serve better. And we help each other to develop deeper values in Krishna consciousness, better practices, and also we serve each other at the mental, emotional, and physical level also. So this constitutes the trunk of the tree of devotional service, of the tree of life. And finally, we have the crown, and that corresponds to Jive Daya. Because in the crown, in the tree of life model, we have how we serve Krishna and we share Krishna with others. So this is exactly what Jive Daya means. We are not selfish. We don't want to keep this blissful process of Krishna consciousness only to ourselves. We want to spread it to everybody. We want to reach out to the world at large. And that exactly is, that's the reason why we do all these different services. Actually, our whole mission is oriented towards outreach. It's a very important point. Our little services, someone washing the pots in the kitchen, or cleaning the toilets in the temple, or doing the backup work in the altar to assist the pujaris who are on the altar. All of these services are also part of missionary activities, because they ultimately create an ambience or create a platform on which people can come together, devotees as well as those who are new, and experience the happiness of Krishna consciousness. So on an absolute level, there is no difference between the different varieties of Krishna consciousness. So washing the pots for Krishna is the same as giving a scholarly class on Krishna consciousness, which is the same as, let's say, going out to distribute books or doing Harinam Sankirtan, etc. So therefore, this helps the mission of Krishna. So the crown in the tree of life represents Jive Daya. So in this way, we can see a pretty accurate correspondence between the three aspects of the three parts of the tree of life on one hand, and the three essential principles of Krishna consciousness as given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on the other hand. Perhaps His Holiness Sachinandan Maharaj has done these three divisions with these three in mind. I'm not aware, but it is a pretty close correlation. And another interesting thing I want to point out, which I have been speaking on various forums, is a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Just about a week ago or so, I was speaking to some devotees from Italy, and the topic there was spiritual community. So in that lecture, in fact, I based the whole lecture on this one verse from the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 41st chapter, the 51st verse. And it is a verse that pertains to a devotee of Krishna in Mathura who was a garland maker, malakar. A word that we heard at the beginning of this lecture also. His name was Sudama. This Sudama is different from the Sudama who went to Dwarka. He is different from the Sudama who was a cowherd boy in Vrindavan. This is a Sudama gardener or garland maker in Mathura. So he served Krishna very nicely, and Krishna was pleased, and he asked him he told him, please ask me for some benedictions. So Sudama asked for 3 benedictions. And Shukadev Goswami describes thus, Sopi vavre chalam bhaktim tasmin eva khilatmani tad bhakteshu cha sauhardam bhuteshu cha dayam param. So Sudama the garland maker asked for 3 benedictions. The first was Achalam Bhaktim. Bhakti means devotional service. Achala. Achalam refers to unshakable. So sometimes a mountain is also called Achala, like Sundarachala, Simhachala. So Achalam Bhaktim indicates unshakable bhakti. So this will roughly correspond to Name Ruchi, those things that will give us taste in Krishna consciousness so that we can steadfastly continue our devotional service. So an interesting parallel between the 3 things that Sudama, garland maker, asks also, and also the 3 principles of Krishna consciousness. Now the second thing he asks for is Tad Bhakteshu Cha Sauhardam. Sauharda refers to the spirit of friendship. Tat Bhakteshu means of the devotees of the Lord. So the second thing that Sudama asks for is a spirit of deep friendship, genuine, well-wishing friendship with the devotees of the Lord. Not a kind of official friendship or a formal friendship or even a friendship that is selfish in nature because it depends on, it's based on you scratch my back, I scratch your back. Not that kind of a friendship, but a genuine, well-wishing friendship where there is love, there is trust, and there is genuine care. So this is what he asks for, the second. And this corresponds to Vaishnava Sevana, serving the Vaishnavas in a spirit of friendship. Service cannot happen in an unfavorable mood. And we all know this from the definition of devotional service as given by Rupa Goswami in the Nectar of Devotion, Anyapilashita Shunyam, etc. I'm sure you're all familiar with that verse. And thirdly, he asks for Bhuteshu Cha Dayam Param, that he should have transcendental compassion on all the living entities. Not ordinary compassion alone. He's asking for transcendental compassion. Transcendental compassion means that compassion has to be seen in the context of Krishna consciousness, not purely on a material platform. So when we assist a devotee in his or her times of difficulty, let's say in times of disease or something, then even though we're helping the material body, but still it's being done with a Krishna conscious purpose in mind ultimately. Because we know that the health difficulty being faced by that devotee will affect his or her Krishna consciousness. So therefore that is also Dayam Param, transcendental compassion or service actually. And similarly we do that to all the other people or living entities of this world. So again a remarkable correspondence between the 3 things that Sudama garland maker asks and the 3 principles of Krishna consciousness and the 3 parts of the tree of life. These 3 principles actually constitute the foundation on which our individual spiritual life should be based, our local community of devotees should be based, and the entire Krishna consciousness movement should be based. So I wish and pray that this mentorship system that you wish to start very shortly in Leicester will take roots very deeply, grow a trunk, and also have a very nice crown of beautiful flowers and fruits. It will be a very wonderful addition to the already wonderful services that all of you are doing. So I would urge all of you to please participate in this program and make advancement individually as well as collectively in your Krishna consciousness. So okay, it's exactly 8 o'clock by my time. We started at 7. It's 3:30 your time. So I have stuck to the time, I hope. And So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. I am quite moved by your presentation on the mentorship, your poetic and very descriptive insight on the analogy of the tree and the importance of the tree, and Srila Prabhupada's explanation of Mahaprabhu's tree and ISKCON being a branch of that tree, your connection to the three principles taught by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And I've taken them and already updated the PowerPoints with those three headings. So thank you so much. And just as you ended on that verse, I was thinking that we could almost make that prayer for benediction our slogan for this program. So thank you so much. I'm just so grateful that you've given such a moving and very deep presentation on what we're about to try and work on here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to share a few things from Srila Prabhupada's teachings. Hare Krishna.
I'd just like to invite devotees, if you have any questions, you can use the chat or you can unmute and ask Maharaj.
Bhakti Rasamrita Swami.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna is Guru Das.
Oh, Guru Das, Hare Krishna. How are you?
Well, thank you, Maharaj.
Very happy to see you. As blissful as always.
Thank you, Maharaj. Maharaj, I just wanted a little bit more understanding of this thing you mentioned about micromanagement. What's the idea there? Is it about details, principles, or is it about being a bit more aloof from helping them in certain ways, or help them make their own decisions? What's the idea there of this avoiding micromanagement, and just anything, Maharaj, more, please?
Thank you. What I meant is that a mentor is not meant to micromanage the life of the mentee. I mean, you're supposed to give, guidance, support, like that, and be a friend. And where, to the extent that the devotee, the mentee seeks help, by all means, the mentee should be willing. But it doesn't mean that the mentor should intervene in every small thing in the life of the devotee. There has to be a balance that is struck. So that is what exactly I meant. One shouldn't be controlling the lives of the devotees like that. It should be a process of assisting, of facilitating, of guiding, of encouraging. Not necessarily one of controlling. Okay?
Yeah. And is it the fact that any spiritual guide, whether it be guru, Siksha guru, mentor, they don't actually say the full truth. They drip feed the information because the mentee or the devotee may not be able to really handle the full truth. Is that the case? Is that what really happens?
It really depends, It really depends on the wisdom of the mentor, and it depends on the circumstances. There are times when it may be essential to say things as they are. And there may be times when you need not say everything just for the sake of saying it. There may be times when you may withhold certain things. The principle being whatever helps that devotee in his or her Krishna consciousness. That's what we should be doing. You know, there's a parallel that I can draw with medicine, the field of medicine. You know, in modern medicine, in the modern world, it is an important rule that doctors will tell the patient everything. They have to tell it as it is, and it is part of their duty, and they could be pulled up if they don't. You know, so therefore the doctors will tell everything to the patient. So the patient can then know what exactly the problem is. In Ayurveda, however, that's interesting that the doctor is given the freedom to judge how much the patient should be told. Because the Ayurvedic doctor is supposed to have that maturity of judgment to understand what will help this patient at this point in time. You know, if I withhold some information, will that person be able to be relaxed and then make it, you know, become better? And if I tell the whole truth, even though the disease is kind of curable, that he may panic so much, and then, you know, because of the stress, he may get worse, or whatever, you know. So the doctor basically has that power of judgment, that wisdom to judge how much to tell. So sometimes it may be necessary to tell everything, and sometimes it may be necessary to withhold a little bit. So that really depends. Okay?
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Thanks for everything.
Hare Krishna.
Maharaj, there is a question from Mrinalini Radhika Mataji.
Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, but thank you for your very clear explanation of the mentorship system. And just happens to devotees who have various Siksha Gurus rather than a mentor. I haven't understood whether we need to have a mentor.
Well, the principle is to have proper guidance and proper association. So it's great if we have several Shiksha Gurus, no problem. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Kaviraj Goswami explains that one can have any number of Shiksha Gurus. It's not a problem. Of course, at a practical level, one must ensure that one doesn't end up getting confused, especially when one takes advice on practical matters, you know. Sometimes what devotees do is they have a certain plan in mind, they want to do something, and they try to look for somebody who's going to, you know, say okay to what they want to do. So they go to one and they get different answers from different people, and it may get confusing. But when it comes to taking inspiration in Krishna consciousness and so on, there's no problem having any number of Shiksha Gurus. However, the mentorship system is a little more formal. You can have Shiksha Gurus and have an informal relationship with them. But the mentorship system means that you come together in a group periodically, you discuss Krishna conscious philosophy, and you chant together, you discuss things, you know. So the mentor is also kind of a Shiksha Guru in that sense. So, but it's a more formalized structure, that's all, for the purposes that I mentioned during the lecture. Okay, so there's another question here from Kishori Jane. I had a question about how we should navigate our own faith and interactions with other branches. Very interesting question. Yes. So I had mentioned in the context of this question is probably that I had mentioned in the lecture that Prabhupada comments that the International Society for Krishna Consciousness is one branch of the tree of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So the question here is, what about the other branches that are existing now? which are also bona fide branches of the Chaitanya tree. So how should we navigate our own faith and interactions with other branches? So first point, we should have full respect for all of them. Number two, we should never offend them. Number three, at the same time, because we are part of a branch, we should remain connected to that branch rather than trying to connect to another branch, because then that causes some confusion in terms of emphasis, in terms of style of presentation, in terms of nature of practices, and so on and so forth. So Srila Prabhupada has presented Krishna consciousness in a certain manner and with emphasis on certain things. He wanted the movement to go along in a certain way. So as followers of Srila Prabhupada, therefore, we will do justice to our belonging to this branch by following the mood, the teachings, and the instructions of Srila Prabhupada. So whilst we respect all other bona fide branches, even if they're non-bona fide, from a distance we will respect them. For non-bona fide branches, we will not follow them. For bona fide branches, which are not exactly our own, we will respect, we will not offend. There are certain things, obviously, which are common, which we can cooperate on institutionally, but because there is likely to be confusion about practical things, there are problems regarding initiation, there are problems regarding shiksha given in one way somewhere, shiksha given in another way in some other place, which may be at slight variance with the way that Prabhupada may have liked to emphasize certain things. So there is that little issue there. So it is better we stay with the branch of the teachings of Srila Prabhupada as he is given in his books and in his lectures, and as propounded by his followers in this branch. So I hope that answers the question. Yes, I think you have encapsulated what I said in your post very correctly. Okay, is there any other question?
I have a question with regard to the three principles that you mentioned, and specific attention to Jiva Doya, being compassionate and kind to all living beings. Sometimes we have to reflect on situations where a person has behaved inappropriately, and we become challenged between the right course of action based on following the principle of daya and compassion and rectification, and also balancing between how close we remain to a person who has been inappropriate in order to bring them back, or to keep them back on track, or to support them and help them through that inappropriate situation. So it becomes a challenge of balancing how much we give and how much we distance. And so therefore the whole principle of Jiva Doya can become either compromised or not well understood.
Yes.
So what's the best approach in a situation like that, if we find ourselves like in that kind of a situation?
Every community will likely face such scenarios. So the question you're asking is of great practical relevance. I cannot give kind of a tailor-made answer, because the answers will depend upon the circumstances and the individuals involved. You know, that's very important. We cannot have one size that fits all kind of an answer. But the general principle here, I would say, is that Jiva Daya remains the principle. However, the question is Jiva Daya towards one person, Daya towards one person vis-a-vis Daya towards other involved people. Because other people are also affected by whatever decision may be taken. So, you know, how does that help? For example, in one temple, I remember years ago, we had a devotee who had some mental challenges of a rather severe nature. And that would often cause some disturbance in the community. And so many devotees were feeling that something has to be done, and that person was refusing to take medical help and so on. So it became a big dilemma what to do, you know. So it came to the point when some devotees started getting so disturbed that the temple management was forced to take some steps. So, you know, on one hand, the temple wanted to be kind towards this one devotee who was otherwise trying to do devotional service nicely, was otherwise sincere, but had some, you know, inbuilt, you know, problems. And on the other hand, his actions were affecting a lot of the devotees. So it's daya towards one or daya towards the others. So the things have to be balanced, you see. And if one remains very cool-headed and very compassionate and balanced, sometimes some decisions may have to be taken which are for the well-being of all. And if all devotees are a little mature and understanding, they will understand that whatever steps are taken are necessary and that they should not, you know, take personal offense like that. So striking a balance is never an easy task in the material world. It's always a dynamic state of affairs, and decisions taken may need to be readjusted, you know, with time. Circumstances change. People's thinking changes. So that's the best I can do to answer that question. It should be done with great sensitivity, at the same time with a lot of practical intelligence as well, and judgment of the consequences of a decision. It is either one or the other. You know, so we try to see how we can balance both and see that the concerned devotee who is affected is looked after, and yet others are also not affected too badly.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Maharaj. I'm conscious of your time in the evening, but there's two more questions.
Yeah, sure, I'm open.
Are there certain limits? This is a question from Gaur Krishna Prabhu. Are there certain limits to what a mentor should do?
Okay, yes, indeed, there are limits to what a mentor should do, as indeed there are limits to what anyone should do, right? Even a spiritual master will have some limits. He will not go beyond a point. Let me give a simple and practical example. You know, if there is someone who has some medical problem, and obviously if a mentor is not a doctor or has some deep understanding of that, the mentor should not just, without studying the matter deeply and understanding the situation, just give some medical advice on an area that is outside his or her field of expertise, you know. So better that the mentor, bring in to the scene some qualified person, maybe some doctor or group of doctors. Similarly, let's say if somebody has some business problem, you know, which is affecting his life very much. And if he comes to me, let's say, I don't have business experience, or I'm not a businessman, I'm not someone who can tell him the details of how to run a business. I can simply give some guidelines overall on, let's say, you know, don't do something that is extraordinarily risky. Don't do anything that is illegal. I can give broad guidelines of that sort. And I can give a guideline that just see what impact this is going to have upon your Krishna consciousness. So that kind of thing, someone like me, I could say, but I wouldn't be able to get into the details of a business because I may not understand it in the first place. So similarly, a mentor dealing with mentees should also understand his or her own limits of expertise in a certain area, because we're not only discussing philosophy here, we're discussing not just practical applications of philosophy, we are also discussing secular or mundane knowledge, like the medical science. So in this COVID situation, what should we do? So, it's not an easy world we're living in. It's very complex. And no one person can be the be all and end all, know all of everything. It's just not possible. And if we try to exceed our limits, then we end up harming others and ourselves too. That doesn't mean that the mentor should be extremely diffident, and reticent or just very reluctant to say anything at all. You can certainly offer opinions, but with careful thought. Knowing where one's area is, that this is not my area, so I don't get into that too much. Okay, so Gaur Krishna Prabhu, I hope that's somewhat helpful.
Yes, thank you very much, Maharaj. Thank you. And then, Maharaj, will make this the final question.
No, I have time, Pradyumna Prabhu, another one or two. I can go until 8:30, it's no problem.
Okay. From Sachikumar Prabhu, thank you very much for your class. I suppose one can contribute to the lives of others successfully when one's own spiritual practice is strong, as you mentioned. So a lifestyle of physical and mental cultivation, including adhering to favorable principles, abstaining from unfavorable, as well as having good qualities. How would a prospective mentee establish these required qualities of a mentor within the framework of a mentor-mentee program?
Well, I don't think what is intended is to go through a very rigorous examination procedure or anything of the sort, Things are a little more, shall we say, spontaneous and subjective. There have to be some objective criteria, naturally, but those criteria have to be laid down by the temple when the whole mentorship program is being formulated or presented to the devotee community. But in terms of which mentor to choose, as far as mentee is concerned, a lot depends on the personal equation between the two, the level of comfort between the two, and to what extent this devotee has some faith and is, happy there. So I guess that will be the main criterion. The other criteria should already have been, the boxes should have been ticked by the temple committee in nominating certain people as mentors. So then it's a question of the level of comfort. In some cases, what happens is the locational proximity also is a criterion, If someone lives at the other end of town, it's very difficult to go to that person's home for a meeting. So you have someone who is in your area, So there could be criteria of that sort as well. So I would keep the criteria very simple from the point of view of a mentee.
Thank you, Maharaj. And in addition to that, we will be working on a list of expectations of both mentors and mentees, so that there is an understanding of what is expected and what are the basic kind of requirements of the mentor in terms of sadhana and so on, before we take anyone forward as a mentor.
Yes, that's good. There must be clarity on that, so that devotees can then freely and without any confusion move ahead. Okay.
Maharaj, I am so indebted to your time today and the guidance and insights that you have given. I will continue to be in touch with you on this as we grow and develop this program here. I just seen one question come through from Kishori. She's asking if there is a karmic bond between guide and follower.
Maybe nothing happens in this world without some background to it, right? Why just guide and follower? Even in the material world, two people meeting together and becoming friends, becoming enemies, becoming life partners, becoming children or parents, all that comes according to karma, right? You know that I was just listening to Prabhupada's lectures today. I listened at lunchtime and breakfast. So Prabhupada was repeating that example found in the Bhagavatam of how living entities come together like straws are brought together in a river by the waves, and then they disperse after some time. So similarly, by the force of time and by karma, individuals come together in relationships as friends, enemies, and family members, and so on. So similarly, it is with guide and mentor as well. So nothing happens without a background. But I guess we needn't put too much of emphasis on that. It doesn't really matter so much. So long as there is a current bond, that is important. The current bond between a follower and a guide is important. Okay.
Thank you again. His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrita Maharaj Ki Jai. Thank you so much, Maharaj. We're going to program with prayers to Lord Nrsimhadev, which are dedicated to His Grace Pangajamri Prabhu, who is currently struggling with his COVID infection in Mayapur, and globally messages have been sent out for devotee communities to pray for him. So I'm going to invite Guru Das Prabhu to lead Nrsimhadev prayers to conclude our program. And thank you all for your participation today. And again, many thanks to His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrita Maharaj for the wonderful guidance you have given. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. I'll wait for the prayers.
Okay. Guru Das Prabhu.
Namaste Narate Naya. Namaste Narate Naya. Pranadana Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Narasimhadev, Narasimhadev, Narasimhadev Jaya, Narasimhadev Jaya, Narasimhadev, Narasimhadev, Narasimhadev Jaya, Narasimhadev. Jai Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Prabhupada, 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Nrsimhadev Bhagavan ki jai, Prahlad Maharaj ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai.
Jay, thank you, Gurudas Prabhu. And we pray to Lord Nrsimhadev that he protects his beloved devotee, Pankajanga Prabhu, who has been in service in Sridham Mayapur since 1971. And we pray that he swiftly comes out of this challenging infection situation in which he finds himself. So thank you again to all the devotees for joining today's program. We'll be sharing more information as the days and weeks go by on our mentorship. And thank you again, His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrita Maharaj, for the wonderful guidance and time that you have given for the congregation today.
Thank you very much. ISKCON Leicester Yatra ki jai.